Hi, this is John Wren. This is the Startup Show. Each morning, sometime before 12:30, it's 12:30 today, but sometime before 12:30, we'll put up a show. We announce it on Twitter when it's going to be live. Maybe some of you have joined us because you saw the Twitter tweet today, but we do that Monday through Friday, and depends on when the guests can talk to us. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, call me Monday or Tuesday morning at 10 a.m. It'll be a recorder. Leave your message. I will get back to the best ones. I won't be able to call them all. You know, the phone just rings off the hook. But 10 a.m. Monday or Tuesday, 303-861-1447. That's 303-861-1447. Well, today we're going to talk about two things. One is Colorado as one people. You know, it is one Colorado, and got the precincts caucus coming up. It's not caucuses, it's the caucus, because it is one giant meeting that brings us all together. We've lost sight of that, and I'm going to propose something to fix it, and I'll talk with you about that today and how that's going to unfold with a tour and maybe even a TV program. We'll see. The second thing is how to find a good job fast. I'm going to reserve the last 10 minutes or so for that. If that's the only reason you're watching is you want to find a good job fast, you can skip everything and just go to the last 10 minutes of the show. And Socrates Cafe tonight, Panera Bread on the 16th Street Mall, just across from the Market Street Station. It's moved from the Panera Bread at 13th and Grant by the Capitol. We're now on the 16th Street Mall, 6 o'clock, and I'm going to bring up the topic of One Colorado tonight. Of course, the group decides, and we'll see what the group wants to talk about, but this is very much on my mind. I'll be sharing with you about it here in just a moment. Now, also Socrates Cafe tomorrow at the University of Denver, in the Anderson Academic Commons. It used to be the Penrose Library. That's at 6:30. We're in the current periodicals, and tomorrow we're going to start meeting a little bit longer. It's going to go until 8 o'clock, so 6:30 to 8 at the University of Denver. All these things are online. You can go to johnwren.com and get links to most of them, or call me, 303-861-1447. One Colorado, about midnight, came across a $50,000 grant that was being offered. I looked, it looked like they just kind of wanted stuff off the top of my head, although as I got into it, it was a little deceiving, so I'm not sure I gave them exactly what they wanted. I'm not sure I'll get the $50,000 grant, but I've decided to do what I propose in the grant, whether they give me the money or not. It's a tour of Colorado to talk about One Colorado. You know, the problem in this country is profound right now. And I don't think that many have talked about what the real problem is. I think it was talked about by Robert Putnam a couple of decades ago, a book that was popular at the time called Bowling Alone. Putnam taught sociology at Harvard, and he had written in a journal article about the declining rates of what he calls social capital. And this is the safety net for many, many people, neighbors, the putting up the barns together. De Tocqueville saw it. But the social capital was in sharp decline. He identified that as a problem. The cocktail party for alumni, a former student, came to Dr. Putnam and said, you know, Dr. Putnam, I read your journal article about declining rates of social participation. He says, you are very, very right. I am in the bowling industry, and there's still a lot of bowling done, but it's not like it used to be. It used to be league bowling, and that was part of this social capital you talk about. But, you know, now people still bowl, but they just come in and they bowl alone. So that's where Putnam came up with the title, Bowling Alone. And it talks about how we are just becoming more and more isolated, and that is continuing to be a problem. You know, the grassroots is in sharp decline. It is burning up. And if we don't save the grass, you know, we might put AstroTurf over it, but it's not the same as a green lawn. And we need to recover the grassroots. And that's where One Colorado comes from, because the grassroots, you get together with neighbors and you may have different opinions on things, but you don't go to war like you do on a talk radio show. And the everybody now is being duped into thinking that the problem is the wrong person is president. I don't think it really makes any difference at all who is the president. I think they're all good people, basically. They're all corrupt people, either way you want to look at it, but they can only do a certain amount. They limited the powers of the president. So no matter who we elect, there are going to be problems that will not be overcome unless we have strong grassroots, and that we develop that here in Colorado through our Colorado Caucus. Yeah, there's a debate going on in Wikipedia right now. Is it caucus or caucuses with a small c? Colorado Caucus, Iowa Caucus, that's a strong term. One Colorado, one Iowa, we're neighbors coming together. We may have two different parties, two different meetings, but it's like a debate team. You may debate with someone, but after the contest, after the football game, you shake hands, it's one, and we are one in Colorado. And that's what we're going to be talking about on this tour. And yes, bowling alone, we're isolated, losing. How do we rebuild the social capital? The Colorado Caucus, March 1st. And what's being proposed now by me is this tour where we will talk about the Colorado Caucus. And the objective would be to get a couple of people in every political precinct to be in the caucus as observers and do overnight reporting. It's a very difficult story for reporters. We'll cooperate with the Colorado Press Association and community newspapers. And newspapers, I'm hoping, will do some training in citizen journalism. That's on a short string. You can see the proposal on johnwren.com. Right below this, if you're watching on johnwren.com right now, you go to the next posting and you'll see what I'm proposing to solve this problem. The caucus is an institution that has been here in Colorado since 1912. We adopted it, and it has served us well. There was a brief hitch in our get-along when we went to the crazy idea of presidential primary, which kills the caucus. And that was overcome and fully restored caucus. We first met in 2004. Now what's happened, it does diffuse party leadership power. And so we've had heads of parties. I remember Carolyn in Denver County was against our effort to save the caucus. She was in charge of the Denver caucus, but she was against saving the caucus. It's like to save the village, we had to destroy the village. And so, I think she was, and there are a lot of party leaders like that because it is work. And so as they burn out, Carolyn had done it, at least one term too many. She was burnt out, and instead of passing the torch, she tries to get rid of the system. But Save the Caucus prevailed despite out being spent 14,000 to 1, mainly with Ruth Prendergast's efforts. I don't think if Ruth was involved, we would have won, but she is a stalwart, and she is the one that should have been named in the Rocky Mountain News editorial, not me. Ruth, you did a great job, and we need your help again. So let's keep talking. But people across Colorado, when you explained it to them, said, yeah, we don't want to get rid of the caucus. And so Amendment 29 was defeated, and we've had the caucus, but the caucus may have been saved, but it's not quite recovered. So now we need to recover the caucus the way it used to be, the way that some people still remember it. Ruth remembers it this way, when we still had the idea of one Colorado, and the legislators would talk to each other in the two parties, and they would be able to come to decisions. That's not happening in Colorado. It's for sure not happening in Washington. Now, everybody thinks, well, if we get the right president, be able to cooperate with both parties. Well, maybe, let's hope. But what we know for sure is if we restore the grassroots and we have a steady stream of new candidates going in that get involved at the caucus, as most representatives here in Colorado have, if they get reelected, some of them, have a hard time getting reelected if they've not participated in their caucus. The caucus is the best chance for the average ordinary person to serve an elected public office, because you leverage your personal resources with the party that you commit to. Now, some people say, well, both parties are bad. You know what? You're right. Both parties are bad. They are wonderful megaphones. They are terrible for taking marching orders from. The political party is not my church. And, I have faith that is very important to me. And it's not in either one of the political parties. More so, it's in the system. But you know what? The system, if let's say the caucus goes away, am I going to think we're doomed? Well, you know, there's probably more than one way to do things, and I'll just have to adjust. But while we still have the chance, I want to see us restore the caucus. And this one Colorado, and the issue comes down, is it caucus or caucuses? On Wikipedia, look up Colorado Caucus. There's a note at the top. It explains this in more detail. And we're going to need volunteers across Colorado, one in every precinct. If you'd be willing to serve, you know, I'm hesitant to say this because we don't have the website set up. What we need is a good webmaster volunteer committee. If you'd be willing to do that, call me. If you want to be one of the precinct volunteers to do the overnight reporting, it's a little early. Don't call yet, but we'll do keep watching. We're here each morning, sometime Monday through Friday, at least by 12:30. We're at 12:30 today. We'll be over at 1 o'clock. The last 10 minutes of the show, I promised that we would save for how to find a good job fast. I've got some experience with that, and I want to share it with you. But, you know, the internet is doing some really good things, but it's also doing some bad things. In one way, it's bringing us together. There's more family reunions than ever before because you can find your family members. I've been doing Ancestry.com. What a really interesting thing. Apparently, I'm a distant relative, it turns out, of Sir Christopher Wren. Although there were some shenanigans, it's clear it was not a straight line. I'm still trying to figure out exactly what the connection is, especially with Shadrach Wren. There's some mysterious pieces. But 22 generations ago was Sir Christopher Wren, and he was one of the founders of the Royal Society in London, England. They were the first to say, hey, we have one England. You know, and it wasn't science against religion, it was science and religion. And the Royal Society very much had that in mind. Sir Christopher Wren gave the first lecture. It was on astronomy. And he taught astronomy, and then he ends up getting the contract to restore all the churches. You know, I don't know how good of an architect he was, but I do know this. He was a terrific salesman because that kept him busy for the rest of his life. St. Paul's Cathedral, he kept going. It was a stream of income for him until, you know, he passed away. So he built some 60 churches. He's nicknamed the church builder, but what impresses me is that he was one of the people that came together in this club called the Royal Society. Now, clubs were a new thing back then, and it was a way to band together, and you had to have diversity because you wanted, no matter who became king, you wanted somebody in your club to be able to defend the other members. And so they cut across all divisions, and we need to get back to that in Colorado. You know, if I'm this purist, and wouldn't the world be a wonderful place if everybody was just more like me? And I have had times I'm sort of in that place. I'm unbearable to be around. But if I really am curious about what you think, and I'm listening and maybe asking you questions, but not attacking you, then I learn new things, you learn new things, and we get the real sense that there is just, you know, this bond that we have. And we have the Colorado Caucus coming up March 1st. Now, if you've not already affiliated with one party or the other, and there's some other things you have to do, but it may be that you can't vote. But if you're unaffiliated, you're for sure not going to be able to vote. But there are open public meetings by law. And especially if you're unaffiliated, I'd like to appeal to you to think about putting March 1st on your calendar and going to one caucus or the other, and then posting what you see there, hopefully on this wiki website we're going to put up that will be, each precinct will have an opportunity to go in and share with us what you see happening there. I'm hoping both parties do an extra good job because they know this is coming, of training their precinct committee people. But, you know, the first order of business in any caucus is to elect the chairman for that night. That's in Colorado law. And what I want to do between now and March 1st is equip people to come in, and if you've got some worn out person that's sick of the caucus, but they're doing it just because they think they're doing everyone such a wonderful favor, then I would like to see you have the ability to say, you know, I would also like to stand as chairman for this meeting tonight. And if it's a worn out person that's not putting the word out, they've got 2 or 3 people that always vote for them. They're the only ones that know about it. You bring a couple of people in, ask to be chairperson. Even that person's friends may vote for you. The person themselves may vote for you because they're sick of it and saying, oh, thank God, I don't have to keep doing this. Because it is a time-consuming process. I had a friend that was in nursing school, and she said that they were taught that when a new procedure comes out, there are 3 things they need to do to learn it. First, they have to watch the new procedure. Pay attention, watch, ask questions. Second, they need to do the new procedure. And then the third thing is to teach the new procedure, and then they really know it once you can teach someone else. And that's sort of what our political system is supposed to be, and the caucus is the full flowering of that possibility. I think it's what the founding fathers really had in mind. It's come about. Alexander Hamilton would have won every election if they didn't organize an opposition party, but ever since then, this back and forth between the 2 parties has served us well. Now, some people talk about a multi-party system, and it would be stronger. No. Look at where there are multi-parties. Now, if you're a libertarian, if you're a Green Party person, that's fine. You know, only the 2 major parties have enough people to be able to field the caucus. And so on the off year, the caucus, Colorado Caucus is every 2 years. What I'm going to be proposing on this tour is that on the off year, this organization that we're creating, there's some names being offered for it, but that this organization has a mock caucus in every precinct, and that both parties do that in a cooperative way, and that the mock caucus comes together and they have real business to conduct so that it actually is firing live ammunition, so you get actual practice. And what they will do is, through this mechanism, adopt resolution that would be put in front of both political parties in the real caucus the following year. And this year, to start that, I'm going to work out, and if you have ideas on the wording on this, please let me know. But the resolution I'm going to be suggesting that we do for these upcoming county and state conventions, the national convention possibly, it comes out of the March 1st caucus. The resolution will be something along the lines of this one Colorado, that we need to overcome this alienation between the 2 parties. You know, I have a friend that ran for office, as I did, as a Republican. Then I changed to Democrat and ran, and he did too. And the Democratic Party is, you know, good people. And I was talking to him, and I said, so how's it as a Democrat? And he says, well, you know, I don't, he said that when I was a Republican, all the Republicans would talk about were what demons those Democrats were. And now that I'm a Democrat, I go to these meetings, and all they can talk about is what demons the Republicans are. And we need to get away from that. You know, negative campaigning is killing our whole country. And I think here in the caucus states, we have the opportunity now to overcome that. And I'm going to be proposing this resolution of one Colorado, but we're one country, we're one world. Now, I'm not saying that we want to not have pride in being citizens of the United States of America, citizens of Colorado, citizens of Denver, Colorado. I'm proud of that. And that if it's moderate, you know, that's a good thing. But, you know, that doesn't mean I think if you're not in Denver, you know, you rural people are terrible. This kind of false argument has to be overcome. And that's what we're going to be talking about on this tour. I'm going to be writing about this. Who knows, maybe I'll be able to get it in some of the newspapers. And I'd like you to join me when I come around in the tour, hear what I have to say. I'd like to listen to you. It'll be a listening tour, but for sure, put March 1st, Colorado Caucus on your calendar. The other thing is how to find a good job fast. Last time I talked with you, and you can go back on our YouTube station, John S. Wren on Google Plus, it'll come right up. Our station, the previous show was how do you get through to the right person? Let's say you know someone that could hire you. How do you get through to them? You know someone that could buy your product or service. How do you get through to them on the phone? and have a conversation on the telephone. Now, it's better to see people face to face. If you can't see them face to face, talk with them on the telephone. If you can't talk with them on the telephone, then send them something in writing. But we've sort of taken the writing and tried to replace the telephone and the face-to-face meetings, and it cannot be done. If you want to find a good job fast, your objective is to get face-to-face with the person that can say yes or no to hiring you, not the human resource department, but the person at the top of the organization. Now, I have done this. I've gotten good jobs fast by having that as my objective. And let me give you a couple of examples that maybe, you could borrow from. One is I had a failing business. It was just really, I realized I was running out of, had 4 kids at home. I had a wife who was very concerned that we have enough money, and they can't blame her for that, that's for sure. And I realized one afternoon, I can remember this, it's a clear memory, I needed to find a good job fast. And so what did I do? I went to my address book. I made a list of about 10 people that knew me well enough to know that I did pretty good work, but not so well that they saw the chaos in my life at that particular point. And I started calling down the list. After I wrote a script, the script said something like this: "Hi, this is John. How are you doing? I've decided to close this business and really concentrate on one company where I could really make a big difference. Who do you know that might need someone like me?" And so I call the first person. I say that, if I think of somebody, I'll call you. Second person, no luck. But the third person says, "Well, I was just talking to someone. They need someone like you." Gave me their name and phone number, and I called him, mentioned his name, got an appointment the next morning, and was hired the next day. And this was not some low-level job. This was one of the best jobs that anybody could ever have. And, it was a great experience while I was there. Unfortunately, my ego got the better of me. I started running the company I remember when we talked about this wasn't going to work out, the boss asked me, "These memos I send you, John, do you even read them?" Because I had done all kinds of really good stuff, but it was not what the boss wanted. So it was on to the next one. I've had a lot of experience finding good jobs, and I've been somewhat successful in that. What I'm not successful at is keeping the job. And so as a result, you become a consultant, which is sort of institutionalizing the process of one thing after another. And I don't know if I'll ever do it with one company again. I think if I had that same job again, I think I could have been much better as a servant of that person. But that's, make the list, make the calls, go get face to face. Don't spill your candy. And if you write a script for yourself, call me first, unless you're really sure. Some people have the knack for it and you don't need help. But if you call me first, no charge to you, I will take the time to make sure you're saying things that are really going to help yourself. Too many people sound like idiots on the telephone, and you don't need to. There's some simple things that you can do that make it much more productive. A second time that I got a good job fast is a company that was a major company here in Denver, and I had left one job for whatever reason it was. I can't quite remember. Oh, yes, I do. Sentinel Newspapers. I was leaving Sentinel Newspapers, where I was a director of marketing and public relations and sales manager. Wearing 2 hats. I was working all the time. But the Minneapolis Star-Tribune decided they were going to pull the plug. And so I left that, and it was a great learning experience. I learned a lot about sales training. We had a week-long sales training program for ad salesmen that Bob Schumacher, who was hired by Minneapolis Star-Tribune to run the paper, he'd been head of dailies before, but he said it was the best newspaper sales training he had ever seen. And we were selling a lot of ads, but it wasn't quite enough. They pulled the plug, and I really needed a good job fast. So made the list, made the calls, interviewed, and I couldn't quite get the guy to say yes. So what I said was, "Well, when are you going to make a decision on who to hire?" And he said, "Well, tomorrow morning we'll have a meeting." I said, "Well, right here in this room," because we were interviewing in the car. "Yeah, right here. When are you going to do it?" Just so that I'll be thinking about you. And he said, "Well, yeah, at 10 o'clock in the morning, we've got an appointment set. It's going to be me and said who's going to be there. And I said, okay, well, so the next morning at 10 o'clock, when I knew they'd be walking into the conference room, I'm sitting there in the waiting room. And he looks over at me and he says, I didn't say to come at 10 o'clock. And I said, well, I know, but I just wanted to be here in case you, as you talked about who you're going to hire, if you had any questions for me. So they walk in the conference room, close the door, and about 30 seconds later, they open the door and he comes out. He says, well, who do you think we're going to hire? That makes a huge difference. Another thing that makes a difference that almost nobody does is after you interview, a lot of times there'll be one interview and then a second. After that first interview, be sure to write a thank you note and hand deliver it the next day. Next morning, you're there with a thank you note, you hand it to them, and if you can, you talk with the people. It's a powerful technique. That I've done a lot of hiring. I have like 2 people that have written thank you notes like that. Almost no one does it, but it really sets you apart. If people see that you want a job, there's a much more likelihood they're going to hire you. I had an economics professor at the University of Denver, Dr. Foster, and he helped me understand there is no such thing as unemployment. It's a fictitious number. They say how many jobs are being created. There's an infinite number of jobs. There is no problem with jobs. And Dr. Foster would tell us that and talk about it. I took more than one class from him, and he told this to every class. It was something that he felt he needed to do. He said, if you want a job, you will find a job. My dad had said the same thing, and I found that's always been true in my experience. If you want a job, you'll get a job. Unemployment is a figment of our imagination. There's an unlimited amount of work to do. Now, what Dr. Foster would say, if you don't believe this, see me right after class and I will hire you. And he said, it may not be exactly the work you want to do at exactly the rate of pay, but I will hire you. And he built a house with student labor that way. And, it is true. If you want a job, and I can help you find a good job fast. I'm mentioning a couple of techniques. One more before we quit for the day. I was in graduate school at the University of Denver. I've been an undergraduate, worked for a while, found I didn't know as much as I thought I did about business, came back for the MBA program, and got elected president of the Graduate Student Association by 1 vote. I got elected state chairman of a youth political organization, and Chancellor Mitchell gave a talk. I can't remember where it was, if it was a small group, as I recall, but anyway, he said in this group, Chancellor Mitchell, he did have a reputation of being somewhat hard to pin down. He said, sort of reclusive, he said. And he said, that's just not true. Very easy to get to. Call my secretary up, I'll talk with you. So I did that. And he invited me to lunch. We go to lunch. He said, what do you want to do? And I had read this book. This is Victor Phillips' book, The Organizational Role of the Assistant to. And it had been on the shelf at the Penrose Library. And why did I pick it up? Because as you can see, it's a very thin book, and I think I wrote a paper of some sort. But anyway, it inspired me that this assistant to the president job is sort of like getting yourself hired as the boss's son. I'd been the boss's son. It had been for 20 years. It was like a 20-year seminar with my dad. I learned a whole lot from him, and I wanted to have another opportunity like that with a manufacturing company, maybe a public company. So he said, what would you like to do at lunch? Chancellor Mitchell did, Cherry Hills Country Club. I said, well, I'd like to be the assistant to the president of a medium-sized manufacturing firm. And he said, that is very helpful when you can be that specific. He said, we'll go back to my office, and there'll be the president of a medium-sized manufacturing company, and I bet he'd like to hire you. And sure enough, he did. That didn't mean I didn't have to try. It was in competition with another couple of students, but I prevailed, won. And then Victor Phillips, who had written this book, and I had written a synopsis of this as part of the hiring process, which is part of why they hired me. I contacted the author of the book after I got hired. He was giving a seminar at the American Management Association, and the company that hired me sent me to his week-long seminar. And then I got to know the author, and he asked me to teach the class, and I did that a couple of times for the AMA. And they said, would you do it again? And I said, well, when do you start paying me? And they said, well, you get consulting clients from this. And I said, I don't do consulting. I'm taking vacation time. So, but that is what opened my eyes to how do you use education as a way to market your product or service. And now they call it content, which I hate that term. But at any rate, we're out of time. I like to keep these no more than a half hour. Find a good job fast. If you can't, call me. I'll try to make it right. Warren Buffett posted something I shared, and it was about the fact that today's much better than we think it is. More material well-being than ever before. And some guy said, yeah, good for you and Warren Buffett, but how about me? I've been unemployed for 2 years. I said, call me. Let me try to help you get a good job fast. I hope whoever that was is watching this. If I get a call from them, it was like a week ago, but if I get a call from them, I'm going to ask them to watch this before we talk. But if you want a good job, you can find it fast. If you find you can't do it, if you're not by the end of next week finding a good job, come to an Idea Cafe Startup Workshop. We may reinstitute them. They're on hold right now in Denver, but I do one most Fridays, 2 o'clock. And come and watch one and then do one with your local chamber. I say that the Small Business Chamber of Commerce cooperates with local chambers to try to help them provide more real help, more free real help to startups and very small businesses. Working together, we can overcome the problem that Edmund Phelps identified in his book, Mass Flourishing, is that we aren't anymore. We're not the creative that we used to be. Everybody's saying, well, let the other guy be creative. We hate our jobs. Love your job. Do work you love. If you're not, find that good job fast. And if you want help, give me a call. 303-861-1447. It's One Colorado. And this is one more show. This is John Wren. We'll be back Monday by no later than 12:30. There's always a recording if you don't see it live on johnwren.com. And remember, this life is very short, so let's go get started. Thanks.